Let's bring in Hollywood divorce attorney David Glass for more on this. David?
People going through divorces are going through some of the hardest times of their lives, and a lot of what they're going through is emotional. And in any divorce, there's a huge sense of loss, and loss of relationship, of money, some friends.
Today, we have a very special guest. Not only is he a chart-topping musical artist, but he has also endured and survived some very difficult life situations. He's going to tell us about his new album, The Process. Meet Judah Akers of Judah and the Lion. So welcome, Judah. Now, as I understand it, there are 19 songs on your new release, and the theme is experiencing grief, the 5 stages of grief, and working your way through it. So my first question is, what inspired you to write this collection of songs?
Yeah, it kind of came from a deep well of just like emotions, heartbreak, going through a divorce, experiencing like suicides amongst close relatives, and just kind of life kind of beating me down a little bit there in a season. And I think as me and my bandmate Brian were kind of talking about writing a record, to be honest with you, I didn't want to write a record about my divorce. That felt like, you know, just almost maybe a little bit too raw just to kind of share with the world. It's obviously, it's a defeat. It's a, you know, there's guilt there, there's shame, all the things that kind of come with divorce. And, and I was writing kind of these like heavier, like angrier songs, you know, honestly, that I just wasn't really wanting to necessarily, put out in the world.
Right.
We try to bring good to the world and healing, versus the latter. And so I think once after doing like a lot of work, just in my own heart and kind of discovering a lot of forgiveness and empathy towards the back end of my kind of healing journey, which I'm still kind of on, as you know, it's perpetual.
Right.
But we were kind of, since me and my Brian and I's mom, they're both therapists.
Oh.
And so we're pretty accustomed to like grief and like learning how to process our emotions and things like that. And music, obviously, or art is such an important avenue for people that are going through grief, to kind of have this outlet. And so we were caught on to Kubler-Ross's stages of grief,
Right.
which is, you know, the denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And so as we kind of decided to write a record about that, it was very obvious that it was no longer just these angry songs about like how I was wronged. It was actually kind of more of like a mirror, like how can I grow from this? How can I look back at, you know, my previous relationship and see beauty in it still, though there was a lot of loss and heartbreak. And learn how to grow. So that's kind of where it came from. And honestly, like writing it, I learned a whole lot about myself. I learned actually, you know, when I was kind of in this denial with my marriage, when I was in this kind of this perpetual state of anger, and through just kind of going back and writing, you know, from those moments, which honestly is really hard to dig up those wells too. It's hard to go back and do that, but I guess our hope is that as healing as it was for me to write it and for us to experience it, we hope that it kind of had that effect on other people as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny. My mother's also a psychologist, now retired, and
Wow, okay.
And that's where I learned about Kubler-Ross, and it was almost review for me when I took Psych 101 in college. Before we get more into the album, my experience with a psychologist as a mother was that we had to have a meeting about everything in the family. There was always a meeting to discuss anything going on. And my sister and I got to the point where we just didn't want to say that there was anything wrong because we'd have to sit down at a meeting. What was your experience growing up with a psychologist as a parent?
Well, so my mom, she got her undergrad in child development, and then she got her master's in counseling. So she's not technically a psychologist at that level, but yeah, I mean, I think for us, it was very similar, like learning how to kind of process our emotions and talk and voice our emotions were a big thing at our house. And, I grew up in middle of Tennessee. I grew up in kind of a jock, and
Right.
That kind of comes with that, or at least for me, kind of came with that stereotypical thing, like, put some dirt on it and rub it in and you move on. And then my mom's side was always like, no, like, let's bring it to the forefront. Let's bring it to the table. Everything kind of has space. And so I think it definitely, like, for me, my siblings, I think my older brother was better at it than me and my little sister, but me and my little sister will kind of bring everything. And then,
Right.
we're all of a sudden, we're just talking about so much stuff. It's like, no wonder I'm in music, where I'm constantly kind of having to talk about my feelings.
Yeah, sure. And you know what? And that brings up another point. I don't know, a year or two ago, I read Dave Grohl's book about growing up and how his mother was always encouraging him to express what was going on. He was playing the drums on the pillows, and she, got a jazz drummer to come to the house to start teaching him. What kind of encouragement did you get from your family in terms of developing your musical skills?
So it like similarly with just pointing back to my mom, I really struggled with I was the athlete that like would go and punch like the locker room after games and stuff, like misprojected anger and all that stuff. And I'm around my freshman year, I had this really kind of bad back injury. It's like my last growth spurt. Spare you the details, but essentially like was out for the count a little bit. And my uncle was actually the one that kind of really encouraged me to step into music that summer. It's like, no, I no longer have the excuse of like, oh, but my sports schedule.
Right.
And it's kind of ironic, but this is going to sound like such a petty story, but my childhood dog died in a car accident. He got hit by a car, and I went and punched like the column at my house. So I was just angry, and my mom was like, "Why don't you go write a song?"
Right.
So that was kind of like my first look at, oh, art can be this outlet for me to kind of get out these emotions and stuff like that. And then my family just kind of growing up, I started playing music in the church where my uncle was a pastor, and then kind of really cultivated my songwriting stuff there, even at that age, of just really being encouraged by these people. I was terrible. I couldn't even play the guitar and sing at the same time. It was really, really bad.
Yeah.
But since it was in this community that was just very encouraging and like uplifting, it was a really beautiful way to kind of start cultivating that gift that other people saw in me, that I honestly, looking back, it was just like, I cannot believe that these people were such an encouragement. It was so bad. I feel very blessed in that way to have been surrounded by family and stuff that really believed in that.
Other than creative work, other than writing songs, do you have any other go-to remedies that you use to move through these 5 stages of grief when you had this particularly difficult period in your life?
Yes. I think 101 for me was meditation. Learning to breathe through things and not allow them to allow me to go back to those coping places that I really struggled with when I was going through my divorce. I really struggled with alcohol for the first time. I had a poor relationship with like distractions, like my phone or whatever it may be. And so I think learning to sit with the emotion, to learning to sit with anger and bringing it to the table and asking it questions. And I don't mean that as hippie maybe as it sounds, but just to know that it's there. So instead of pushing it away, because I also wrestled with like chronic back pain. So I got really into like body keeps the score and body knows the way. And just breath work. I did a lot of EMDR work, a lot of like brain mapping and such as well. So a lot of work. And then on the physical side, like I got really into exercising. Again, I kind of had the athletic background, got into like the Wim Hof methods, like the breathing in that way too, with the cold plunges and saunas and, all that stuff. So I feel like with exercise and like the therapy and the meditation and stuff like that, and really honestly coming back to my faith was all beneficial for me.
Yeah, I mean, you took a obviously multimodal approach. You threw everything you could possibly gather added. And in terms of
And I
those five,
think
go ahead.
just that you have a really sweet like energy about you, by the way. I just wanted to point that out. It's like very,
Thanks.
very like nurturing to me. I felt very comfortable. But I think like that was the frustrating part of all of it was like that I think I was ready for someone to come and just tell me like, hey, this is how you fix heartbreak. Like,
Right. Right.
but let me give you a step-to-step program
Mm-hmm.
that allows you to free yourself from this. And the truth was like there was no step-to-step program. You know, even like the stages of grief with Kubler-Ross, it's like it's very evident that you don't just get through denial
Right.
and then you're done with denial. You know, you don't just get through anger and then all of a sudden, I feel like acceptance is this beautiful kind of, accepting or surrender of like, hey, I can be okay with this. Like I'm gonna sit with this. This is not what I necessarily would have chosen. But
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, like I can move forward and hold this and be okay with it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I just like threw everything at it because it was like, man, I have to do something because I was in such a chronic state of stress and depression
Yeah.
that I had, I kind of had to go 0 to 1,000, and that's awesome, just my personality as well. But it was very frustrating when I was in that, and to be an encouragement to someone out there that's listening is like, there's no right way to go about healing,
Sure.
and that's really frustrating. But
Yeah.
to understand that you can and you will, that's the thing to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. It's such an individual process. And I've worked as a psychologist, and currently I work as a divorce attorney, helping people through their divorces. And every single person is completely different, and something that works for one person absolutely doesn't work for the next.
Yeah, yeah.
And so with your songs, do the songs on this newest album, did you work through, or do the 19 songs work through in some way all these five stages of grief?
Yeah, so the way that we kind of laid out the record, which people will be able to see when they go and look on Spotify or wherever, however people listen, but
Yeah.
essentially like we've labeled like denial on the record, so it'll
Oh.
be like an instrumental, and
Hmm.
it'll just be like denial, and then there's gonna be 3 or 4 songs beneath denial that
Hmm.
go back to like my process with denial.
Yeah.
So and then that's for each section. So then it goes into anger has as an instrumental, and then 3 or 4 songs under anger, and yada 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 for the whole 5 stages. So it
Oh.
really is like, I grew up on records.
Yeah.
I loved going and buying like my CDs and stuff like that. And so I feel like even though we live in kind of a singles world
Hmm.
now with just the way that the music industry is, me and Brian definitely wanted to have like a whole piece of
Sure.
art that people could go back and like listen to the parts of them that are anger or still in anger,
Mhm.
and then have this kind of beautiful story of, I guess our main single on the record is called Long Dark Night of the Soul, and that's on the acceptance side, which hopefully we can kind of point people
Sure.
continually back to this area of forgiveness, that true light, the true hope can come out of true depths of pain and darkness.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up on records. I'm a little bit older than you, but I just remember the records I enjoyed, the albums I enjoyed most, told a story, and the songs were in a certain order because they moved you through feelings. And I would open up the liner notes and listen to them sitting on the floor cross-legged. Well, it was a totally different experience, at least for me, than getting on a streaming service.
I completely agree. Yeah, it's like being able to digest someone like as a piece of art versus just the one song,
Yeah.
is definitely mine and Brian's preference for sure.
For sure. And how do you work with Brian when you're composing these songs? I'm always interested in that. I've listened to interviews of Billy Joel, who says he comes up with the music first and then has to figure out the words. Other people come up with the words first. What's your process, and how involved is Brian?
So I like most of the songs, it feels like, at least on this record, and it's always different, but Brian is such a maximizer. He's very detail oriented. he's kind of the yin to my yang in that way. I'm more of like, I had the vision. I'll come in with like the lyrics or the melody or whatever, and then Brian kind of makes all the details and everything just that much better.
Yeah.
I'm kind of one of those. I don't like writing unless I'm inspired. Like I'm not. I have some friends that are like, I'm gonna write a song every day, and I'm gonna, do the thing. And luckily, like I've had a lot to write about, and I have been inspired, a lot. But like I don't believe in writer's block. I think people that are experiencing like writer's block or creative block, they're just needing like some adventure. Like I just think that like that's like your body's way of being like, hey, I need to get out and live some life. So for me, like melody, sometimes it's melody comes first, sometimes the lyrics come first. But mostly like for me as an artist, like I just want to be in the moment. Like I want to have this feeling of like, if I'm gonna like honor this space and honor where I'm at, like I want this thing to feel real. So sometimes that just starts with me on the piano and a pad, or me and the guitar, or sometimes it starts with like some angry beat that I make,
Right.
that I'm just like bopping to. So it's kind of it ebbs and flows for us, but I think that my favorite moments are the ones where like I'm completely just immersed in whatever is kind of coming out of my heart.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, your songs are full of moments of self-reflection, some philosophy, poignancy, and they end up with hope. But through those 5 stages of grief, what was any one of the stages particularly difficult for you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was in such a thick depression, and I didn't even know it.
Yeah.
It was, again, like I lean optimistic. I lean positive mindset person. Like I'm 80% of the time like I'm kind of kidding around with you personality wise. Like
Right.
I love to have a good time. But I'm also like very deep emotionally. Like I feel I'm a very empath type personality too. So I feel really hard. And so until I was out of the depression, I didn't really realize how bad it was. And so when I went back and sang those songs, or wrote some of them based off of like where I was at, I was like, holy Nikes. Like
Right.
I was, I mean, luckily I was never like in the pit of all pits where I was contemplating my own life or anything like that, which I've had friends that have struggled in that way, but like, it was very, very low. And so going back and singing some of those songs, even going back now listening to the record, I'm like, man, I was really low. So I feel like singing those songs live is going to be pretty hard.
Yeah.
And understanding that somebody out in the audience might be there in that moment as well, which is why we love music, but it's also what makes it hard.
Sure. And now I know you've gone through divorce, and not that long ago, which a lot of our viewers have gone through. What advice do you have someone who, at any point of the divorce process, they're discovering that their marriage isn't working, or they're working through the divorce, or they're trying to get through the last details? What advice could you offer to people?
I feel like for me was one of the biggest. There's a couple of things like non-regrettables. Someone said like in the middle of kind of me fighting for my marriage in my own story, I had a rule. It was like non-regrettables. So I didn't want to go out and sleep around. I didn't want to like I wanted to be able to look back and be like I did everything that I could in my own story. And then 2, the second piece of advice, like when I kind of discovered that it was like not gonna happen, is like just be gentle with yourself. I think being gentle with yourself and with your partner or ex at that time or wherever it may be in the stage, like just learning how to like hold space for yourself to be, you know, really heartbroken.
Yeah.
Because I was really struggling again, like with coping in ways that I hadn't really done in my life up to that point, and that honestly just came with like this heavy guilt
Mhm.
and shame, and you're already going through like so much change, and so I have like a lot of empathy for you if that's what you're going through. I just I kind of confessed to my therapist, who's like one of my close friends now, but I said, you know, I think I'm really struggling with alcohol. Like
Mhm.
a part of my story too is my mom's kind of been in and out of jail with alcoholism, and um, you know, I was just like, I just don't, I've never done this. You know, I'm really, you know, ashamed. And he like looked at me and he goes, "Of course you are." He was like, "Your heart is just been ripped up. Like,
All
of
right.
course you're coping in that way." And I just was, you know, bawling, crying, like, and he wasn't condoning the toxic behavior, but he was
Right.
just giving me permission to kind of be gentle with myself and to like honor the fact that like, you know, some like it really hurts. And so I feel like when I gave my permission to accept those parts of me, and those I did a lot of shadow work in that moment too. So like learning to love these pieces of me that were kind of feeling shame,
Yeah.
feeling guilt, and just to know that you can be gentle with yourself, and that at the end of the day, like you're still worthy of love.
Yeah.
Those were the biggest hurdles of mine for sure.
Sure. I mean, when I was in therapy, I was sort of problem free through college, graduate school, early career. And I ended up at a job where the people were just awful. And the more awful they were to me, the harder I worked to try and prove myself to them.
Mm,
And then I finally decided I've got to get out of here. And I felt a lot of shame at the idea that I was going to quit. And my therapist said to me, listen, when a house is on fire, you run out of it. You don't sit around and look and try and fix it. You don't walk out of it. You run out of it. And
right,
it's those directions from therapists that sort of, oh yeah, that's right. This is a normal thing to do. This is not an abnormal.
right. Yeah, get your ass out of there, you know.
Right. Right. Now, now on the divorce, I like to say that divorce is a second chance for happiness for people. If you're in a bad situation, if you're not maximizing your own happiness, if you're not doing it in a contributory way, get out and figure out some sort of other relationship. What have you felt on the backside of trying to get through these processes with your divorce?
Yeah, I mean, I as an encouragement, like I'm engaged.
Oh, great.
Um, so
Congratulations.
I found like love kind of came to me pretty quickly. And so that was my story. I'm personally still wrestling with a lot of trust issues, and just the way that my marriage ended. And so it comes with those uphill battles, but I feel like that's kind of what love truly is. And
Mhm.
to allow another person to come in and be a part of that healing even has been such a rewarding thing for me as well. I was not expecting it to be this quick, to be honest with you. I probably um I was more shocked than anyone, but you know, I feel like it is that time of reassessing, doing some personal inventory, at least in my story. Figuring out how to be loved again was very challenging as well. Putting down those armors and all those things that you kind of
Yeah.
put up after your heart's been broken. But on the other side of that, yeah, I think learning to know that you're worthy of love, and you're worthy of a love that can hold your heart. And yeah, especially in those situations too, like when it's like a bad situation, or
Mhm.
you know, whatever it may be, you definitely deserve love.
Yeah, well, you're speaking my language. I encourage all of my clients who go through divorce to, if they're not already in therapy, to get into therapy, because it's very easy to list here are the 25 things my ex did wrong and caused the divorce. It's a different thing to look at yourself and say, well, how did I contribute? And what did I do wrong? And what can I fix about myself?
Yeah, and that's you know, at least for me in my journey, it took me a long time to get there because I fought like hell for my marriage.
Right.
I, you know, I kind of, again, going back to non-regrettable, is like there were a lot of things that I look back and I was like, can't believe I did that. I probably should have ran sooner than what I did. My
Right.
best friend and sister are telling me to. But then, like, it's not to go back to the record, but to go back to the record a little bit.
Sure.
Like that inner bargaining for me was that personal inventory of like, okay, like I can look at myself here and be like, man, I was not great, and these are my blind spots that I really need to work on, especially if I'm going to give myself to another person. Again, not that you have to be perfect. That's not what it's about. One of my favorite life coaches says, "Don't ever become perfect because you'll have no one to relate to."
Right.
So perfection is never the goal, but I think surrender is, and sometimes surrender is going back and looking in the mirror and owning up to your own stuff.
Absolutely. Well, I'm really happy to hear that you're continuing to work through a lot of these issues. My father at my second wedding, after I was divorced, worked through my issues, found a wonderful woman that I've now been married to for 14 years. But at my wedding, my father said, a good marriage isn't just finding the right person, it's becoming the right person. And that's what you're describing is being able to work with someone under any circumstances and figure out how it works between you.
I love that.
Yeah.
I'm gonna steal that quote.
Yeah, that's great. Put it in a song. You don't have to give my father credit either. He's fine. He's in his 80s. Doesn't need any sort of residuals or royalties. But anything else you want to share about the album for people who haven't listened to your music, or to encourage them to go listen as you start releasing songs?
Yeah, I mean, again, me and Brian are, we're no experts on the stages of grief. We're storytellers. We love stories. This record is about as specific and honest as you can get without laying out every single detail. And again, it was very healing for me to write it. And so I guess my hope is that it would be healing for the people that are listening, and in some ways can kind of become songs for their story if their journey's at all similar. And again, like we just make music to hopefully make our listeners feel less alone in the world. So we're really proud of it. And I feel like it's a really beautiful story about the process of grief and healing, which we're very excited about the healing part of that.
Yeah, that's great. What a great story. What a great idea for an album. The album again is The Process.
Yeah, it should be fun. They're outside shows too, so it should be a rowdy, fun time.
That sounds great. Listen, what a gift that you gave our audience today, really sharing your process through a difficult period, how you used your music, how you used the other things. And so where can our viewers get more information about you and about Judah and the Lion?
Just like on our socials, it's all just at Judah and the Lion. We obviously have a website and all that stuff, but I feel like we're pretty active on like our Instagram channel, and TikTok now, baby, is everywhere.
Yeah. Right.
So we're trying to like engage, like historically, because of therapy, it's like therapy would say get off social media, but we've been doubling down on kind of getting the word out on this record. So we're kind of easy to find online. And I appreciate your sweet spirit and all that you're doing to kind of help humanity heal as well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks so much, David.
Thanks so much.
I don't know what any of this means, why we go through so many things. Scared of death and too afraid to live. That's why me and my friends just talk about the aliens. Breathe in, breathe out, my 2 feet on the ground. Breathe in, breathe out, my 2 feet on the ground. this wasn't meant to happen.